There was a god in Kemet who could not be killed, not by sword, not by fire, not by flood or plague or the jaws of any beast in creation. He was the sun itself, the one who spoke the world into being with his own voice. And yet one day he lay on the ground, poisoned, screaming, dying in front of every god who ruled beside him. He was not brought down by an army. He was brought down by 4 words, whispered by a woman who already knew how this would end before it began. This is the story of how she did it, and why, 3,000 years later, it's still one of the ideas Egyptologists find most unsettling. You have a name. Someone gave it to you before you could speak, before you could choose, before you even knew what a name was for. You use it every day without thinking. It sits on your documents, your accounts, the things that prove you exist. Now imagine that name was not just a label. Imagine it was a lock. And somewhere out there, one single person held the only key. That is not a metaphor. In Kemet, that was the literal architecture of reality. And this goddess understood it better than anyone who ever lived, mortal or divine. Her name, the one most of the world knows her by, is Isis. But that was never actually her name. And by the end of this video, you will understand exactly why that distinction is the entire point of the story. Let's start with the idea that makes this whole story possible, because without it, none of what follows makes any sense. In Kemet, a person was not made of one single part. The body was only the container. Ancient Egyptologists have reconstructed at least 5 distinct components that made a human being whole. There was the Ka, a kind of life force. The Ba, closer to what we would call personality or soul. The Ak, the transfigured spirit a person became after death, if all the rites were done correctly. The Shute, the shadow, treated as a genuine extension of the self, guarded and protected the same way the physical body was. And then there was the Ren. The Ren was the name, not a nickname, not a title. The actual sacred name, spoken at birth, recorded, protected for a lifetime and beyond it. Here is the part that sounds strange to modern ears, but was treated as absolute fact along the Nile for over 3,000 years. If your Ren was destroyed, you were destroyed. Not metaphorically, literally erased from existence in this world and the next. This is why Kemetic scribes carved names into stone instead of writing them only on papyrus that could rot. Stone lasts, and as long as your name existed somewhere, spoken or carved, some part of you continued to exist with it. It also explains one of the coldest political weapons in ancient history. Damnatio memoriae, the deliberate destruction of a name. When later pharaohs ordered the name of Hatshepsut chiseled off her own monuments, or when Akhenaten's name was hacked out of temple walls after his death, this was not vandalism. It was assassination, aimed at a person who was already dead, trying to kill what was left of them a second time. Now hold onto that idea. Because if your name is your soul, then knowing someone's true, secret name is not just information, it is ownership. And one god in Kemet had a name so dangerous, so central to his own power, that he refused to speak it to anyone, not to his fellow gods, not to the humans who prayed to him every sunrise. His name was Ra. Quick clarification before we go further, because you may have noticed something already. This video is titled Isis. That is the name written on the title, the name you searched, the name most documentaries use, because it is the name history handed down to us through the Greeks. But it was never the name her own people spoke. Isis is a Greek rendering of a Kemetic word. The real name, the one used in temples along the Nile for thousands of years before any Greek traveler ever wrote it down, was Aset, and she was not the only one renamed this way. Horus, in the same Greek transliteration, was Heru. Set was Sutek. Thoth was Jehuti. These are not obscure alternate spellings we are inventing for style. They are the original names, and the ones on screen from here forward are the Greek ones, kept only so you can find this video and know exactly who we mean. So from this point on, in the story itself, we are going to call her by the name that was actually hers. Aset, not Isis. Her son will be Heru, not Horus. His rival will be Sutek, not Set. The god of writing and wisdom will be Jehuti, not Thoth. Ra stays Ra. His name survived translation almost untouched. Now, back to the god who would not speak his own. By the period this myth comes from, Ra was old. Not old the way a king grows old on a throne, but old in the way a myth needs a god to be old. Trembling hands, a mouth that had begun to sag, saliva that dripped uncontrolled from his lips as he walked his daily path across the sky. Watching him was Aset, and Aset was not simply a goddess of motherhood and mourning, the role most people assign her today. She was already known by an epithet that Kemetic priests did not hand out casually. Werti Hekau, great of magic. She noticed something everyone else overlooked. Ra's spit, falling uselessly onto the sand of the earth below, still carried his essence. It came from the body of the creator of the universe. It was, in a very real sense, still part of him. So Aset knelt down. She gathered his saliva where it had fallen. She mixed it with dust from the ground he had just walked across, and with her own hands, she shaped it into a serpent. Not a real serpent, born from another serpent, the way every other snake in creation had come into the world. This one had no origin except Aset's intention. She placed it, motionless, directly across the path Ra walked every single day. Then she waited. Ra walked his path the next day exactly as he always had, because that is what old habits, even divine ones, tend to do. And the serpent Aset had built from his own spit, and the dust of the earth sank its fangs into him. The pain, according to the papyrus that preserves this story, was instant and total. Ra's cry echoed through the sky itself. Every god in the pantheon heard it and came running. Sutek, Jehuti, all the great names of Kemet's divine order, gathering around their king as venom spread through a body that had never once, in the entire history of creation, been wounded like this. Here is what made this moment genuinely terrifying to the people who first told this story. Ra was fire and sun, and the breath of creation itself. Every healer among the gods tried their craft on him. Every spell, every remedy, every trick of divine medicine known in the heavens, nothing worked, because the serpent had never existed in nature. It carried no natural poison with a natural cure. Its venom was something else entirely. A kind of magic built specifically to resist magic, drawn from Ra's own divine essence and turned back against him. The only being with the knowledge to undo a poison built from Ra's own body was the being who built it. And she was standing right there in the crowd of panicking gods, watching him suffer, waiting. Aset stepped forward and offered to heal him. Ra, even in agony, was not a fool. He understood immediately what kind of transaction was being proposed. To cast a true healing spell in the magical logic of Kemet, the healer needed to speak the sufferer's actual name over the wound, not a title, not one of the many names Ra used publicly, his true, hidden, secret name, the one bound to his very existence, the one he had never once spoken aloud in the presence of another living being. So Ra tried to buy his way out with counterfeit names. He offered her a list of his public titles instead. I am the maker of heaven and earth, he told her. I am the one who forms the mountains. I am Khepri in the morning, Ra at noon, Artem in the evening. Grand, true, and completely useless, because these were functions. These were job titles the entire world already knew. None of them were the name that held his soul. The poison did not ease, not even slightly. Aset told him plainly that his true name had not been among anything he had just said, and the pain would remain exactly where it was until he gave her the real one. Picture this moment for a second, because it is the actual center of the entire myth. The most powerful being in existence, the creator of literally everything, lying on the ground, poisoned by his own saliva, turned into a trap, negotiating with a goddess over 4 syllables. Not armies, not thrones, 4 syllables, and he would rather burn alive than say them. That is how much a true name was worth in Kemet. Eventually, Ra ran out of road. The venom did not relent, and no other god in the assembled crowd had any answer for it. His strength, according to the account, was visibly draining out of him with every passing moment. Whatever pride had kept his mouth shut through the first false names was now being burned away by pure physical agony. So Ra agreed, but even in surrender, he set a condition. He would allow his name to leave his body, but not into open air where anyone might hear it. He asked that it pass directly from him into Aset, heart to heart, so that no third party, divine or mortal, could ever intercept it in the space between them. And with that, in a transfer, the original papyrus describes almost like a physical event rather than a spoken word. Ra's true name left him and settled inside Aset. The poison broke immediately. Ra's strength returned. The crisis that had gathered every god in Kemet around his failing body simply ended. But something had also permanently changed, and every god present understood it, even if none of them said it aloud. The most closely guarded secret in the universe no longer belonged only to the one being who had always held it. It now belonged to her too. Here is where this story stops being just a myth and becomes something historians find genuinely remarkable. This tale was not preserved as pure entertainment. It survives today primarily on the Turin papyrus, dated to Kemet's 20th dynasty, somewhere around 1186 to 1169 BCE, along with fragments on the Chester Beatty papyrus and several inscribed pieces of pottery from the workers' village at Deir el-Medina. And it was written down for one very specific, very practical reason. It was a medical document. In Kemetic healing practice, medicine and magic were never separate categories the way we tend to divide them today. A physician treating a snakebite victim did not choose between a spell and a remedy. They used both together as one single act of treatment. This particular myth became the spell. The healer reciting it over a poisoned patient was not just telling a nice story to pass the time. They were reenacting the exact moment Aset outthought Ra, invoking her victory as a kind of template. The poison in the patient's body was now magically obligated to follow. If Ra's poison could be broken by this story, so, in theory, could yours. And the ritual went further than just speaking the words aloud. The same text could be written out on papyrus or on linen, over a small painted image of the healer god Heru Hekanu, or of Aset herself, or of Heru as a child. Some healers had their patients steep that written charm in water, then drink the water itself, letting the words of power pass physically into the body they were meant to protect. A story turned into medicine you could swallow. This is also the moment Aset earned the epithet that would define her for the rest of Kemetic history. Werti Hekau, great of magic, not simply a mother, not simply a mourner for her husband Wesia, but the single most cunning strategist in the entire pantheon, a goddess who had outmaneuvered the creator of the universe using nothing but patience and dust, and her own saliva-soaked trap. And the practical version of her spell did not vanish with the Kemetic religion. Physicians writing more than 1,000 years after this story was first recorded were still copying it, in some form, onto papyrus meant to treat real patients with real snake bites. An idea born in a myth outlived the civilization that invented it and kept being used in a medical context for centuries. Now here is why this myth mattered for something much larger than one healing spell. It mattered for who was allowed to rule. Aset was the mother of Heru, and Heru's claim to the throne of Kemet was, throughout Kemetic religious history, locked in an ongoing conflict with his uncle, Sutekh, over who legitimately held the right to rule the two lands. A mother who held a portion of Ra's own power was not a small detail in that fight. It was leverage. Every time Aset acted on Heru's behalf, whether in magic, in negotiation among the gods, or simply in her reputation as Werti Hekau, she was drawing on authority that had once belonged exclusively to the creator of the universe. This is also almost certainly connected to why Kemetic queens so often carried the throne symbol directly in Aset's own iconography. Her name itself, in the original Kemetic language, has been linked by some scholars to the hieroglyph for a throne, though that reading is still debated among Egyptologists rather than universally agreed upon. Even so, the association between this goddess and the seat of kingship runs through Kemetic art for thousands of years, and it is hard to separate that symbolism from a myth about a goddess who had proven, in the clearest possible terms, that she could take power directly from the most powerful being in existence. Heru did not just inherit a throne through his father's death. His legitimacy was reinforced by a mother whose own myth was, quite literally, a story about seizing divine authority through intelligence rather than force. So let's end on the question this myth actually raises, because it is not a comfortable one, and it was not comfortable for the people who first told it either. Was what Aset did to Ra an act of brilliance or an act of betrayal? Read one way, this is a story about the oldest form of power that has ever existed. Knowledge. Aset did not fight Ra. She did not overpower him. She built a trap out of patience and observation, waited for the exact moment his own aging body created an opening, and then negotiated with total precision until she got exactly what she came for. In a pantheon obsessed with strength, spears, and solar fire, she won using nothing but her mind. Read another way, and some ancient commentators clearly did read it this way. This is a story about coercion. She poisoned her own king. She let him suffer, deliberately, refusing to heal him, until he surrendered the single most private thing he possessed. By any modern definition, that is extortion, dressed up in the language of myth. Kemetic religion never fully resolved that tension, and it did not need to. Aset was worshipped, without contradiction, as both the loving, grieving wife who reassembled her husband Wesia's body piece by piece, and as the goddess who blackmailed a god. Kemetic theology had room for both truths to exist in the same figure at once, the way a single person can be gentle in one part of their life and utterly ruthless in another, without either side cancelling out the other. And maybe that is exactly why this myth has survived for more than 3,000 years, while so many others faded. It refuses to let you decide, once and for all, whether cunning is a virtue or a threat. It just shows you a goddess who understood one unshakable rule of power in her world and arguably in ours as well. The one who controls your name controls you. Ra learned that lesson on the ground, poisoned, screaming, surrounded by every god he had ever ruled. Aset learned it long before that day ever came.